We're going to talk 10 minutes each and fill up the hour and tell you our experiences in various fields of endeavor in the world of entertainment. On our panel are Stocker Fontelieu, Nelle Nolan, Ed Nelson, and Brian Batt.
Hold your applause till the end.
Not necessarily.
Hold your applause till the beginning.
Each one of us has been out in the field quite a while, and I think each one has experiences that'll be fun to share with you. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce Stocker. Stocker Fontelieu is known to everyone in New Orleans. He was a longtime director at the Little Theater. He is a very fine actor himself. He was also the director of the Monroe, Louisiana Little Theater. He does endless, countless voiceovers and commercials because he's known to have one of the finest voices anywhere around. As a director, I can actually attest to the fact that he is benevolent, accessible, intelligent, warm, encouraging, supportive, all the things that a director should be, because you may have noticed, if any of you have done any performing, that sometimes the director and the actor are natural enemies. Not so with Stocker. He's the director that you want if you're going to be in a show. And without further ado, I'll let him have his say. Here is Stocker Fontelieu.
Thank you. Thank you. May I use the podium?
Sure.
Thank you, Linda. I hope
What time is rehearsal?
I'm benevolent, just shut up. About a year ago, I was asked by a theater conference that I belong to, the Southwest Theater Association, to prepare a biography that they wished all of their past presidents to do for two reasons: to make sure their archives are up to date, but more importantly, so that the younger generation would know what some of their elders have done, many of whom are anonymous to these young people. So I'm going to do something here. There we go. So I'm going to refer to this. Director, actor, and educator Stocker Fontelieu has been a member of the Southwest Theater Association, then known as the Southwest Theater Conference, since 1952. He's one of the original 14 founding members of that organization's College of Fellows, which was established in 1985, and he served as president of the conference, following terms as vice president and twice as treasurer. C. Stocker Fontelieu was born on what in Mexico is called Cinco de Mayo. We all know that is May 5th. In my case, that was in 1923. Born to Eleanor Stocker and radio executive Theodore J. Fontelieu in New Orleans, where he has been a lifelong resident, with the exception of 3 years in the United States Army's 96th Infantry Division in the South Pacific during World War II, and 4 years in Monroe, Louisiana. While in Honolulu in 1945, recovering from shrapnel wounds suffered in Okinawa, he happened to see a USO production of Blythe Spirit, the first play he had ever seen. This purely by chance experience changed his life, and upon his return from the Army, that was on December 1st in 1945, he returned to New Orleans and re-enrolled in Tulane University in 1946, forsaking architecture. His original major started in 1941. Stocker entered the Department of Theater and Speech, chaired then by Dr. Monroe Lippman, Ed remember, from which he received his BA in 1949, and where he later worked toward an MFA with the department's first MFA class. Dr. Lippman, who would become the Conference Association president in 1953-54, would also be a major influence in shaping his students' future. Fontelieu served as executive and artistic director of the Little Theater of Monroe, that was here in Louisiana, for 4 years, and then in New Orleans, where for 7 years he served in the same capacity at the Gallery Circle Theater, and for 24 years at Le Petit Théâtre de Vieux-Carré, and then 7 years at the Bayou Dinner Theater. That took us to 1993, and from that time to the present, he has been a freelance director, actor. He has lectured. All of this he business has to do with being written as a biography for someone to read. I could say I, but let's go with what we have here. He has lectured in community theater and has served as adjudicator at theater competitions throughout the Southwest and the Southeast. Though one of the South's leading proponents of community theater, he hasn't let that stop him from lending his talents to professional, academic, children's theater, film, television, radio, the opera, and the symphony. In fact, all areas of the performing arts. His voice has not only been heard in countless commercial voiceovers, but as the narrator for films for the National Aeronautics and Space Administration, for Martin Marietta, for the United States Forestry Service, the 1984 Louisiana World's Fair, the New Orleans Museum of Art's Fabergé egg exhibit, and PBS TV's George Orr, the Mad Potter of Biloxi, which is still being shown at Biloxi's Orr Museum, but also as master of ceremonies for both Mardi Gras balls, the New Orleans Summer Pops, and numerous conventions, both local and national. He has appeared in over 40 films and TV movies, including Angel Heart, The Big Easy, Pretty Baby, clips of which were shown just recently, Cat People, The Toy, Hobson's Choice, Obsession, and The Heat of the Night, and A Gathering of Old Men, to list just a few. It is in the theater, however, where Stocker has truly made his mark. Since 1946, he has been involved in over 400 stage productions, appearing in 75 and directing the rest. It has been as a director that he is most notably recognized. He has directed comedies from Oscar Wilde to Noel Coward to Neil Simon, dramas from Tennessee Williams to Arthur Miller to Edward Albee, and musicals from Rodgers and Hammerstein to Stephen Sondheim and everything in between. He has directed dozens of New Orleans premieres, most notably Gallery Circle Theater's A Streetcar Named Desire in 1956, and I'm sure Ed Nelson will have something to say about that as we move on. Remarkably healthy, he is still going strong, and is, well, as of this morning. We never know each morning. We never know. One never knows. And is pleased to accept assignments a year in advance if he can fit them into his busy freelance schedule. And some of his most recent directorial assignments include directing his favorite musical, 1776, as well as one of Neil Simon's comedies he likes the most, The Prisoner of Second Avenue, I Hate Hamlet, and Blithe Spirit, the play that drew him into the theatrical world almost 60 years earlier. Freed finally from the rigors of over 40 years of managing Louisiana theaters, this octogenarian has also been able to devote more time to acting, and some of his challenging roles in the past decade have been two of Eugene O'Neill's plays, The Long Day's Journey into Night and The Iceman Cometh, as well as Inherit the Wind, Of Mice and Men, Mornings at 7, 12 Angry Men, The Marriage of Bet and Boo, in which the playwright from New York, Christopher Durang, came down to see the play, and just last summer, at the time of my life, appearing in The Fantastics. When the director of that play called me, he says, there's a character in The Fantastics called the Old Actor. Can you think of anyone who might be interested? I said, I'll research that for you and get back to you. I promptly called him back and said, I'm interested and available, and I played the Old Actor. Looking back on the long career, he takes special pride in participating in such musicals as My Fair Lady, where he appeared as Henry Higgins, and in 1776, he was the secretary to the Continental Congress, Charles Thompson. In How to Succeed in Business Without Really Trying, I played J.B. Bigley, which is the role that Rudy Vallée created on Broadway, and in Charlemagne, I did Pippin, as well as leading or principal roles in such other plays as The Caine Mutiny Court Martial, Arthur Miller's All My Sons, The Price and the Crucible, The Glass Menagerie, The Taming of the Shrew, Winterset, Golden Boy, Gideon, The Ladies Not for Burning, and The Barretts of Wimpole Street. At its 1994 convention in New Orleans, the Southwest Theater Association honored Fontelieu with its Distinguished Service Award. His many other honors have included Lifetime Achievement Awards from the Big Easy Entertainment Award, and also the Stora Boone Theater Awards, the City of New Orleans Certificate of Merit, the Contemporary Arts Center Beaux-Arts, member of the Alpha Psi Omega Honor Fraternity in Theater, Tulane University's Milton H. Latta Memorial Award, and and a Distinguished Achievement Award upon his 50th anniversary in theater, presented by the Board of Governors of Le Petit Théâtre in 1946. And just last summer, that same organization, Le Petit Théâtre, honored him as their 2003 Luminary of the Year. For his work as an independent director and actor since 1993, he has received 1 Stora Boone Theater Award and 11 nominations, and 2 Marquee Awards and 4 nominations. And in addition to his work with the Southwest Theater Association, he has served on the board of the American Community Theater Association, as a member of the National Theater Conference, and as president of the Tulane University Theater. Longtime member of the Screen Actors Guild and the American Federation of Television and Radio Artists. And I would just like to say it's an honor to share the stage with this quartet of people, because I think, Linda, do you remember us doing Bus Stop?
I love doing Bus Stop.
Nell, do you remember us doing The Diary of Anne Frank? Brian, do you remember us doing I Love My Wife and Auntie Mame? No memory. No memory. And Ed, I'm sure you remember A Streetcar Named Desire. Stella! You're cast. Let me just say in conclusion, I have been asked on numerous occasions, are you ever going to document what you have done? We don't want you to get away from us without it being documented. Well, it has happened. As a result of putting this together for the theater conference, my very good friend and very literate biographer, genealogist, and researcher, Michael P. Cahill, and I are working on that much-awaited and long-awaited biography under the humorous title, Just Who is Dr. Fontelieu Anyway? And if any of you would like to know more about that forthcoming tome, I'll meet with you in the lobby after this program.
All right,
Thank
let's
you.
bring him out! Dr. Fontelieu!
Thank you, Doctor.
Very nice, Doctor.
Well, I hope Stocker's going to go out and get a little experience somewhere.
Yeah.
Well, that's it for our conference, and thank you for coming.
Gonna keep doing it till I do it right.
That's right.
If you read your little brochure, that beautiful, colorful brochure that Patricia Broussard had printed, you will see that this is the order she asked us to appear. But before I tell you a little bit about my impressions of children's television in the early days, I'd like to ask Helen, did you have something that you wanted to say?
Not now, thank you. I'm going to give you the awards.
Oh, the awards, wow. Well, I have worked in television what seems like all my life. I started out in radio as a very small child. Everyone needs a mentor, and my mentor was a marvelous lady named Terry Flettrich, who was drafted from her job at D.H. Holmes and went into radio and then subsequently into television, and brought her friends and her children acquaintances with her, and I was fortunately one of those. Television started in New Orleans in 1948 when WDSU came on the air. Ed was a floor director there. I knew a little bit about it because my godfather, Roy Schwartz, was in advertising. And he would say, Linda, do you want to be in a commercial? And I'd say, okay. And then I'd go down and sit on a bus. And it was a commercial for Greyhound Bus. And they'd say, all right, everybody do something. And no one really knew what to do. And I figured, I'll just wave out of the window like I'm saying goodbye to someone. That was the kind of television that we had in the olden days. It was, as Alec Gifford says, the Stone Age of television. WDSU was the 6th station in the South to go on the air, only the 48th station nationwide. So they were hungry for local programming, and they had programs of every possible length, 5-minute shows, 15-minute shows, half-hour shows. The first regular show that I did for children was a program called The Magic Tree. It was in conjunction with the New Orleans Public Library, and we told 15-minute stories. There were about 4 or 5 storytellers who rotated. In those days, there was no such thing as a teleprompter, so everything had to be word perfect. it helps to know someone up at the top. My mother happened to be the director of the show. So
Beat that.
anyway, she was my coach and the coach of the other storytellers. And she was absolutely relentless with her strictness. You could not miss one single solitary word. I don't think there are too many people nowadays who could do that kind of television. We're all very reliant on the teleprompters. They're wonderful devices, and you just read. And the news anchors, no matter how natural and charming and adorable they are reading. And in those days, though, we did not read. So I suppose after doing radio with Terry, I started when I was about 7 years old in radio, doing commercials for the war effort. Teacher says we should save our tin foil and bring it to school where it will be collected so that we can win the war. That was the kind of work that I did when I started out. And from there, Terry Flettrich, who was the most enterprising woman, always looking for new avenues of self-expression, had a show called Buddy's Book Corner. And Al Shea and I were on it, and some local child actors. And it just seemed so very natural. My parents would put me on the St. Charles streetcar. I'd ride down to WWL, which was in the Roosevelt Hotel, read from a script on the radio with my fellow child actors, get on the streetcar, and come home. So it just seemed like something to do, like you'd be going roller skating. Anyway, as Terry moved into television, she took me with her, and Al Shea as well, and some of her other kids, and we began doing local shows. There was a show called Magic Town. There was a show called Holmes Teen Magazine. So going into television was as natural for me as getting on the streetcar. I got married after going to theater school and doing acting in plays, and Romper Room came up for grabs. The teacher, Miss Ginny, was moving out of town. She and her husband split, and she moved to Baltimore. And so Romper Room became available. And I hemmed and I hawed. I had 2 children. Albert and I led a kind of busy life. But I said, if somebody really terrible gets it, I'll be furious and I'll be kicking myself forever. So on the last day that you could call up for an audition, I called and I said, I'd like to audition for Romper Room. They'd already heard 200 ladies, and there were 12 left to go, and I was one of the 12. And I went down, and God, they were so pretty. And I came home and I told Albert, I don't think I'm going to get it. But fortunately, experience pays off. And part of the audition was doing a commercial, because we did all our commercials live on the set. And they were all commercials that I had done with Terry. And there was a thing of Jack's cookies, there was Brown's Velvet Milk, there was Bosco, and a loaf of bunny bread. So I chose Happy Jack cookies because I knew the song. And this is it. I'm Happy Jack, the cookie man. I bake Jack's cookies, they're the best in the land. Crisp and snappy as they can be. Smile fresh because they're made by me. Jack's cookies always smile and fresh. And thank you. I have to admit, it was wonderful. So I got the job of doing Romper, and of course they asked me to appear to be talking to children. That was easy because I love children. And then they said, tell a story about spring. So I began to talk about spring, and then I wound up and I said, they said, do you have anything else to say? I said, no, I think that does it for spring. And so I went home, and they called me the next day and said I was the new Romper Room teacher, which I did for 7 years. Romper Room was a treat for me. The children were so adorable, so wonderful, so full of surprises. It was the most interesting job that I have ever had. The kids were just darling, and I found out things about children that I had never known before, that they were so very literal. You had to be absolutely literal with them all the time. For example, one week we were talking about how dangerous it is to talk to strangers, and it's very important not to get into a car with strangers. And if you meet someone on the street who is a stranger, and he says, "Little girl, I've just lost my precious little puppy. Will you help me find my puppy? Will you get into my car and we'll ride around and look for my puppy?" You must not do that. And so I told a few more stories, and then I said, "Now, children, what do you have to say? Will anybody here talk to a stranger?" And there was this silence, and the kids were kind of looking at each other, and finally someone said, "Miss Linda, what's a stranger?"
That's wonderful.
That's cute.
So, after explaining that a stranger was someone you didn't know, I turned to one little boy and I said, "Now, Lee, what would you say if a stranger said to you, 'Little boy, would you like a piece of candy?'" And I said, "What would you say, Lee?" And he would say, "Please." Romper Room was wonderful. It was wonderful fun for me. I met so many precious children and their lovely parents, and I enjoyed doing every minute of it. But Romper Room was also a barometer of change. I started in the 60s, went on through the 70s, and when we first began, the mothers would bring the kids to the station. But as the years went by, fewer and fewer mothers came every day with their children. The grandmothers would come, the husbands would come, because the moms were taking jobs and going back to school. It was a real change for women at that time, and I could see it with my very eyes. Also, there were movements that were very visible. Police were being called pigs, and I hated that. And I went to the station and I asked them if I could start a police boosters organization with the children. We'd have a little badge, and we would all talk about how wonderful it was to have policemen in our lives, that they safeguarded children and families. And they didn't go for that. They said, "No, we don't want to get into anything political. Miss Linda, stick to your business, which is just guiding the children." And so that's what I did. We also had some incidents with integration. Our show was not integrated when I came on, and I thought that was just so wrong. And so I started out by asking people I knew, like my postman and the lady who babysat for my children, if they would have children in their families come to the show. Well, when it began, and I'm going to wind up after this, because everybody else has so much to say, there was a little boy on the show named Caesar. He was the nephew of my cook, and he was looking around at the set and holding the flag, and I always used to say, we always keep the American flag off the ground. We never let it touch the floor. So, and the children did it all the time because they were interested in the surroundings. So he picked up the flag and held it, and some woman called the station and said that a little black boy had thrown the American flag on the floor and trampled on it. And I said, "But that is so fictitious. That never happened." They had erased the tape, so we could never prove them wrong. She called Walker Romer, who was supplying the milk to the show, and we did Walker Romer commercials, and the account executive withdrew the milk as a sponsor for my show, and I was terribly incensed. I called the advertising agent, I called the account exec, who I knew, and I said, "Bill, how could you do this? This is knuckling under bigotry in the worst possible way." And he said, Linda, I don't tell Albert how to do his business. Don't tell me how to do mine. And that was the end of Walker Romer for our show. Commercials were very important to us because they paid the bills, even for a little children's show. There were many very cute and clever children's hosts in New Orleans. Terry Flettrich was the star. She was an amazing woman. Wayne Mack was wonderful. He could do a silly children's show and then go on and be serious and do the sports anchoring. Only in New Orleans could you have a situation like that. Henry Dupre came from radio to do Popeye and Pals. And that was, I guess, the golden age of children's television, because now everything is a feed from network. There is no local children's programming, and that is kind of a shame. But perhaps someday someone will come up with something really great, and you will see another local children's show emanating from New Orleans. So many of us have so much more to say. So I'm going to say goodbye, and thank you so much for hearing about children's TV in the early days. Thanks. Now I'm going to introduce a beautiful lady. No Orleanian is unaware of her presence. She does so much in town. She's a skillful writer, a journalist, a teacher, an actress. She is absolutely charming in all of the venues in which she participates. Let's hear from Nelle Nolan.
Thank you.
Take it.
Thank you, Linda. This morning, when I had the great pleasure of opening the conference, I've talked about 6 degrees of separation. So let's even look at this cast. Stocker, in theater in New Orleans, baby, you the man. And thank you for casting me quite a few years ago in Daria Van Frank. Linda, we have admired for years. What she did not mention about herself is how many times she has appeared on this very stage, of course, with Summer Lyric Theater, and a wonderful CD she has of her poetry, which I have at home and listen to so you can just relish that gorgeous voice. And she has probably forgotten this, but I was doing the Glass Menagerie and doing it in France a number of years ago in French. And she lent me the dress that she had worn when she did it locally. So again, thank you, Linda. And Ed Nelson and Linda performed in Love Letters, which I myself have performed in, and it was just really a treat to see them do something, a play that I myself love doing and relish doing. And Brian, we all know, love Brian, have seen you for years, and it's also fun to go up to New York and see him. Wow! And he even took Robin and me backstage to see his wonderful dressing room and see pictures of his family around, so quite a treat. Linda has graciously introduced all of us, and one of the things when she and I were talking about this week as to certain insights we could bring to this panel, I've had some out-of-the-country theatrical experiences which have been just wonderful. The first was with a local man named Lucien Boulard. He's a Frenchman who has lived here for quite a few years, loves theater, and he put together a group called Les Tréteaux de la Louisiane. And we were doing a small play by Molière, and he told us quite a few years ago when we were doing this, he said, we're going to take it to France. Well, we did. And we were asked to perform in a Molière festival in the south of France, in Pézenas, where Molière himself had lived. And that was really thrilling because they'd only asked about 8 French language groups to perform in this particular festival. And one of them was the Comédie Française from Paris. I mean, that is the theatrical company in France. And here we were, our little group from Louisiana performing. And I think the French mentality still has in its mind, you know, when you say you're from Louisiana, I think they still think of the space of the Louisiana Purchase. So Louisiana is even bigger and better over there in a lot of ways. Other performances that I've had have been with Southern Repertory Theater, and if everyone remembers Rosary Hartel O'Neill, she and I have known each other since we were about 10 years old. We did theater together when we were in high school. We were both at Sacred Heart Academy, and we did not have a real theater department there, so we organized it, and we did everything. I mean, we did the costumes, we did the makeup, we did the direction, and you can imagine 5 and 6 and 7 high school girls, age 16, directing this play together. But we did well, and we took some plays to state competitions. Nonetheless, she invited me on several occasions to perform abroad. So twist my arm, someone's got to do it. At one point, she called me and she said, Nelle, you've got to come and introduce this play. And I said, Rosary, I can't, I'm so busy. She said, no, you've really got to come because we're doing this in the Théâtre de Nelle. And my name is Nelle. Okay, Nelle spelled N-E-S-L-E, but okay. Call Delta, get a ticket. One of the performances that I did do, and this was very special, was to do in the French language, to do the Glass Menagerie. And number one, we love the language and the poetry of Tennessee Williams, and then yet to see it in yet another language, and the French language, which I love, was a double treat. So pinch me, I'm dreaming. Number one, to be acting. Number two, to be in France. And number three, to be acting in France. Wow. An interesting experience I did have was Tbilisi, the Republic of Georgia. Now, Rosary O'Neill asked me to be in this play that she herself had written, and it was in Tbilisi, and she invited me to lunch one day and proposed it, and she said, it's going to be in Georgia. And I said, uh-huh, and she said, but not the state of Georgia. And I said, Rosary, I know Georgia because Robert, my husband, and I went there on our honeymoon, and we did, and we went to the Republic of Georgia. So here we were in Tbilisi, Georgia, and I said, Rosary, you're giving me a script that's yay thick. And she said, oh, you can read it, just sort of camouflage it, you can read it. And I said, well, there's no way I can learn all of this in 2 weeks' time, finish work I have to do in New Orleans, get out of town, get on a plane, fly to the other part of the globe, and do this play. And she said, no, that's fine, you know, you can be on book. Okay. So the director steps in about 3 days before the show and before we fly to Tbilisi, Georgia, and she says, no, you will not use book. I said, there's no way. I had never even rehearsed the whole play start to finish. I wasn't even sure which scenes came, but she wouldn't let me use the book. There was this very powerful scene I had with Rosary's own son, Barrett O'Brien, marvelous actor himself and budding playwright, and I thought, I just don't know these lines. So I'm just going to, in the first place, it's nice to be performing in front of an audience whose native tongue is not English, in case you miss a beat. I thought, I'm just going to talk to him the way I think the character would talk to him. And we had a marvelous scene. I mean, the people were coming up afterwards, embracing us. Oh, that was so powerful. And even the playwright, Rosary herself, said, I think that was the best it's ever been done. Whew. Okay. But as we were going into Georgia, one of the interesting things was many of the plays that this particular playwright, Rosary O'Neill, did had a gun involved. And imagine us arriving in a former country of the Soviet Union, arriving at midnight with a gun in possession. Okay, I won't go further, but it was an interesting experience. In London, I performed at the Tristan Bates Theatre. It was named after Alan Bates, the recent late Alan Bates' son, who had died himself as a young man. We performed there, and so half of our cast was American and the other half was English, but we were all going to do an American play based in New Orleans. You can't believe the accents these Londoners were coming up to replicate what we talk like in New Orleans. And I beg anyone in film coming to New Orleans, please don't put these false accents on us. Will anyone ever get it right? I like to write, and after 9/11, we all know of New York. It's the theatrical mecca of the world, excuse me, London West End, but it is. And after 9/11, our hearts were broken for so many reasons. And I thought, what can I do? I can't do anything as a journalist. I can't do anything as a teacher, but I wanted to raise some money. So I wrote a show. It's a series of 5 monologues. It's called Monologues and Music for Money Honey. And money that we raised a couple of years ago we sent to Ground Zero. And we had a lot of fun with the show, so I kept it going and used it for some local charities. So that was very fulfilling in a lot of ways. I like to think it was a win-win situation. Recently, I've done with David Stone, Love Letters. We performed it for the 10th year 2 weekends ago. Last weekend, I had the great pleasure of doing a scene from Shakespeare from Hamlet and doing this with the St. George's Players. And I portrayed a man. Had a good time doing it, but rather androgynous. So Hamlet coming out in a tuxedo and in a scene when he is talking to his to-be false buddies, Rosencrantz and Guildenstern, and telling them that he has lost all his mirth. And I thought, how do I play this scene? I thought, okay, make it rather sardonic. Came out with a tuxedo. The character is jaded. The character's having no fun anymore. The martini glass, you finish it up, eat the olive, and walk off. So had a lot of fun doing that. I'm also working on a dance routine, a couple of dance numbers. One's a waltz and one's a tango. And with that, I will pirouette off the stage and turn it over to my other colleagues, and thank you.
Wonderful, Nelle. Good job. Beautiful, dear.
She's a delightful girl. I'm so proud to call her my friend. And I've got all friends up here, and that's what makes it so much fun. Ed Nelson has just finished speaking to you, but his experience is unlimited. When I first got to work with Ed, I was thrilled because I'd seen him perform and knew what a wonderful actor he is. He's had so many wonderful times in theater and screen and television, and I know he has endless things to share with you. So here's Ed Nelson.
Thank you.
Share.
Can I use your background?
The other half.
Thanks, gang. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. As many critics would tell you, I never took any acting lessons at all. I came to Tulane in 1949 in pre-law. The only acting I had done is a part of a high school play in Camp Lejeune, North Carolina, where my dad was in construction during the war. But I had the unfortunate experience, my principal from high school will tell you, in setting up the microphone at the assemblies. It was a very small school. 87 was the total enrollment. And all our teachers were teachers that were qualified to teach the universities. So we had a wonderful school and a wonderful student body, and when I would set up the microphone, it was about 1/10 the size of this auditorium. I did the normal routine things, and 1, 2, 3, 4. Can you hear me in the back? The students were all there, but the principal wasn't here yet. So I'd do an imitation of the principal, which wasn't too tough. He had a lazy tongue. Just kind of hang out a little bit. And I'd say, 1, 2, 3, 4. And pretty soon when the teachers were laughing, I'd do it a little further. I'm a Tar Heel born, but God will not die, I'll be a dead Tar Heel. And that's what he said all the time, Well, I didn't know that was politically incorrect at the time. I'm just glad he didn't have other handicaps, But I also did Roosevelt in those days, and Peter Lorre, and James Stewart, and Wendell Willkie, those of you that are historians that are here. And pretty soon I got some pretty good laughs, so I thought this is something nobody will ever pay me for, and went on back to the back of the room and in the classes, and finally graduated at Camp Lejeune High School after I got out of the Navy. I got a GED, and years ago I got a letter from the bursar here, or was it the registrar? Yeah, the registrar. And it was a copy of my application to Tulane in 1949. And she had circled my salutatory response, which said, was it the salutatory? Whatever you say for thanks. And it said, respectively yours, Ed Nelson. And written by hand, it said, when I read this, I knew you needed an education. Well, I was used to that, too, because I went back to a high school reunion, and they guy that I used to skip school with was now the head of the superintendent of schools. He said, I got one of Ed's report cards, and they had all A's on it. He said, I knew I made a mistake. I started looking through them, and then I looked, and it was under attendance. You know, this is the first stage I ever worked on in a theater, really, in 1949, right here in Dixon Hall. And it was a wonderful experience. A campus night was the organization. We wrote the play. We wrote the songs that make the world go round. Oh, no. We wrote the songs in a French Quarter apartment that one doctor's son was in the play. Wynn Pierce, later a fine teacher in California. Well, I had a lot of fun with it. I remember Wynn said, you're a comedian? I said, I am, meaning with a question mark. And the first show, you know, he hit me with a pie. You know, he did all of the things, pushed me over a barrel, you know, and all of a sudden I got a lot of laughs with pie on my face and things like that. And I said, I don't know if this is a career that really I'm going to respond to. Still, I never thought about being an actor till I was about 23. Not once. In my day, you know, you grew up and nobody knew an actor. You know, and nobody ever saw any theaters. And my first play was in Boston that I saw when a buddy of mine, when we went to the USO, got a date, and I was standing around. The only thing available with tickets to the theater was Henry VIII. And later on, I found out Victor Jory, who sat next to me at the board of directors at the Screen Actors Guild, had played Henry VIII in that play. And Ephraim Zimbalist was carrying a spear in it, and Bill Wyndham, William Wyndham, who was the doc in Murder, She Wrote, you know, he was a spear carrier also in that very play. So it was a wonderful experience, and I couldn't believe what I was looking at, you know, to see a play like that in costumes, sword fighting. Gosh, how could anybody make a living doing fun like that, you know, that kind of, and I forgot about it, and that was that. Until I came back here to Tulane, I met Ronald Bazzarini, who was a great theater person here at Tulane, and went on and got his doctorate at Yale and taught in schools in New York City for a long time. We're still in contact. And he said, I want you to do a play, Scene, from Lilium. And Dr. Lippman, who is the head of the theater department, the Stocker referred to, and my real mentor forever, I guess, was going to grade me as a director. And I did the play, and I did the scene. It was just Baz and me, you know, and Doc sitting there watching. And he got a good grade. And later on at Le Petit, they were doing the great Pulitzer Prize winner play, Sidney Kingsley's Detective Story. And another graduate that went on to be a doctor in theater, Byron Sigler, got ill, and he was now the head of the department up at Washington State. It used to be Teachers College. And so they asked me if I would do the part. And I said, you know, with an audience and everything? They said, yeah. Jesus. You know, what, just one night? No, it's on the weekends and all week. You know, it was a membership house in those days. And I said, well, I'll go down there, you know. And so I went down there, and there's a guy who opened the play, Detective Dacus. In a movie, Sam Jaffe played the part. And Lee Grant, who I later worked with in Peyton Place, was a shoplifter. And he opens the play typing, you know, name, you know, address, you know, that type of thing. Well, I got a little buzz out of that, you know. And the next play was Caine Mutiny. And I said, well, you know, I remember that's all men, and I know I'll get something in that. And I went to, and it was already cast. They were rehearsing upstairs and all. And I said, well, that was it. And the next thing, Bazzarini, my buddy, wonderful writer now, an actor still, said the next play is the greatest American play ever written. And we're going to get it one of the first theaters after it leaves New York. What is it? He said, Death of a Salesman. And he said, I'm going to play Biff, and I want you to play his younger brother, Happy. It's a great part. Well, I didn't know you had to read the whole play. No, I mean, you know, you get the book and you go, Happy. Oh, I can say that. Yeah, you know. Happy. Oh, yeah, I can say that. You know, Happy. And so I went in and I read for Happy. And in the old days, they'd put the list, the cast list on the door. And on Mondays, you go by and look at it, see who got what part. And I didn't get Happy. I looked at the list, and I got, it wasn't too much light there. Bill. Yeah, Bill. Okay, so I ran across Bazzarini. He said, what part did you get? I said, I didn't get Happy. He said, what part? I said, Bill. He said, there is no Bill. I said, there's no bill? He said, no. Did you get Biff? Well, yeah, I guess so. I don't know. Well, of course, that was the one that Baz wanted. And the part, he said, my God, that's the part in the play for young men, Biff. Well, I went back and I looked at Biff. Biff. Oh, yeah. Geez, I got to say that? Jeez, I got to say that? And I went to Doc and I read the part. There's a wonderful scene where he catches his father in a hotel with a lady that's a lady of the night. And he cries. He can't believe his father would do this. And I told Doc right away, the crying scene is out. I'm not going to cry in front of all those people. Well, you have to know how that went over with Dr. Lippman. He was incredible. He made it so that every night we performed, I looked forward to the crying scene most of all. I knew that I was the only one that really knew how to cry. And it was my obligation to show the audience the pain and suffering through well, anyway, I cried and really loved it. And I knew Doc. Doc was the most sarcastic person in the world, and successfully so. And I was second. It's not good to be second with Doc. You'd say something wise and crash one night we were doing Stalag or one of the other shows, a wonderful show, and Charlie Schilling, rest his soul, they said to him, all right, this play, Doc said, is so bad. What time is it? 11 o'clock. I want you here bright and early tomorrow morning at 8 o'clock. 8 o'clock? In the green room, Charlie said, I'll show him. 8 o'clock, 11 o'clock. No, I'm going to stay up all night. I'll show him. I thought, geez, the great Charlie. That's wonderful. That's one way to really show him, And we played it, and he was great. Later on, when I did Harry Truman for a year on the road in Give 'em Hell Harry, Doc came to see the play in California when he had retired out of Claremont University. And I saw him, and afterwards, and finally I could get alone with him, and I said to him, Doc, come on, what do you think? What do you think? He thought a moment, he said, you were every bit as good as I knew you were going to be. I said, that was Doc. And then I suddenly realized directors think you were as good as you could be with the handicap of the director that did the show. If I would have done the show, it would have been better, and you would have been better. And so in theater, which started here in New Orleans, I worked at Gallery Circle Theater. Stocker directed me in one of my favorite plays, in one of my favorite parts, where I hardly knew what I was doing, in Streetcar Named Desire. We opened, we got reviews that came from a man named Hughie Poteet, who was a killer of all theater, and it said strange things in it. Now, I'm going to have to turn around when I say this because I can't face anybody. But he said, Nelson was better than Marlon Brando in the picture. I have that brown review tucked away somewhere, I don't read it more than once or twice a week. So Stocker and I go back a long way, and I've always enjoyed it. He was masterful. I don't know why he cast. I don't remember reading for it or anything. Later, that was at Gallery Circle, which is arena. You can imagine Streetcar Named Desire in arena. It was a little on the powerful side. And we did Billy Budd there, and we did several other shows there. I did a John Garfield movie that was turned into a play. He Ran All the Way, and several others. But the real fun and the real work was done at Le Petit because of the proscenium, because of the feeling of the fourth wall and the response you get. So we did a bunch of films here, too. NOPD was a series that was shot here at a company called MPA, which was a company that did trailers and things like that for movies. Bring Your Clothes to Fred's Cleaners and things like that used to run, at the beginning of films and at the end of films. And Brown's Velvet with a cow up on top of the building or whatever. And we did that, and I was going to act in it, and they told me, am I running out of time?
I think we have just a few minutes more.
A few minutes more? Oh, my God.
Great to hear Brian.
The rest of it, I'll be writing a book if you want to get a copy. Thanks for listening.
I told you he could go on forever. And it's all wonderful. It's all wonderful.
Geez, I thought
I never get tired of
Just
listening
getting warmed
to
up.
Ed. But we're trying to
getting
go
warmed
by
up.
the clock. And here's a young man that I know that you will want to hear because he is our current man in town on Broadway. Brian has done a lot of Broadway shows. He went to school here in New Orleans at Newman School where all the girls loved him, so say my nieces, because he was the handsomest boy in the school. And he is now doing extremely well in the Big Apple, and I'm going to ask him to tell you about some of his experiences. What is it really like up in New York in theater?
In 3rd grade at Newman, I was asked to be Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer. And I kind of came from a somewhat theatrical family. My grandmother was a preeminent dance instructor in New Orleans, Hazel Nuss, and my grandfather started Pontchartrain Beach, the amusement park. So there was a little bit of theater going on. Anyway, I was asked to play Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer. They rigged up a little nose that would light up. My mom taught me a little routine. At one point, I stood on my head, and the whole crowd went crazy clapping, and I was hooked, albeit I was upside down, which is basically the rest of my career. Anyway, I knew I was hooked then. I did shows in high school and then college on this stage, of course, and at Le Petit. And it was at a performance of Godspell. They were dedicating the theater to Helen Hayes. And she came in, and before we were in rehearsal, they asked, does anybody know who could do fundraising? And my mother did a lot of fundraising for many, many charities and many organizations. And I said, my mom will. And so Mom ended up being one of the organizers of this gala. And I wanted to be an actor. I was in college, and my father was dead set against it. And Helen Hayes came to see the show. She met my mother and said, was name Bat, is that the same boy that played Judas or whatever the character was in Godspell? She goes, yes, he wants to be an actor, and we're trying to discourage him. And Helen Hayes said, no, you should encourage him. He's good. And my father and mother went out with Helen Hayes for lunch, and she talked to my father and kind of talked him into helping me out. And when I opened in my first Broadway show in New York, Starlight Express, I got a telegram from Helen Hayes saying, welcome to Broadway, may you have a triumphant stay. And it's framed, and it's just one of my prized possessions. But my first Broadway show, actually what also made me want to be an actor too, on this very stage, I won't mention any names, but a professor said to me, it was during a show, said to me, why, with your looks and my talent, we'd be on Broadway. And in the back of my little head, I went, no, with my talent and my looks, I'll be on Broadway. No, but it was kind of a challenge. And because I was a very naive, and I still think I am a very naive kid inside. One of my good friends, she was a model, and she was, did a lot of modeling, and she was in New York, and she said, Brian, I don't think you're going to make it. You're too sweet. What does that have to do with it? Anyway, I went up to New York and became really bitter and jaded, and I stayed here before you. No. So I did my first Broadway show, Starlight Express, which was on roller skates. And it was an Andrew Lloyd Webber show, and the set was 3 stories high. And I auditioned, and it was the same week I was auditioning for the original company of Les Miserables and the original company of Starlight. And I didn't get it, but they kept on calling me back, just kept on calling me back, because people would get injured every other day. Later I would. But I willed myself not to fall down in the audition. I did get a pair of roller skates, and I roller skated through Central Park with my friend Keel Junius, she did a lot of shows on Broadway too. And we were not really that good. We'd go down ramps, and we'd break up crack deals, and all through Central Park. And finally, at my last call, I willed myself not to fall down. I said, as long as you stand up on the skates, and I ended up getting cast, but I had to do cartwheels and handstands and you name it on roller skates, 3 stories. Anyway, after that I got to do Cats on the tour and then on Broadway. And then my agent called, and I will be grateful to him for this forever. He said, Brian, there's a script, and I think there's a part for you in this, and it's by Paul Rudnick, who he wrote In and Out, a lot of movies. He's written a lot of plays, and he's quite a humorist and just a brilliant guy. He said my agent said it's an AIDS comedy. And this was at the height of the AIDS terror. And I said, an AIDS comedy? And he goes, it's by Paul Rudnick, trust me, just read it. And in it, I was supposed to I auditioned for the role of a dancer that was HIV positive. and he was in Grand Hotel. So I read the script. I remember Mom hearing me. I was like with the scenes, and Mom was up visiting me, and we were in Saks, and there was lines where the character was like, I can't remember what Darius was saying. It's like, oh, Jeffrey, get over it. It's, you know, be safe. You can have sex, and it's just sex. And Mom was like, honey, keep it down. We're in Saks. So anyway, at the callback, Paul Rudnick looked up, and he looked at my resume and goes, are you really in Cats? And I went, yeah, now and forever. And that was the motto of Cats, Cats, now and forever. I said, yeah, now and forever. And he said at that moment, he rewrote the part for me. And when I sat down for the first rehearsal, and I was so in awe of these people that I was in the same room with. There was 8 actors, and I think 5 of them graduated from Yale, 1 from Juilliard, and 1 from the Central School in London, and then me. And I was like, I went to Tulane, thank you very much. And they were all brilliant. Harriet Harris is now in a TV series called It's All Relative. She won the Tony Award for Thoroughly Modern Millie. I mean, everyone was great. I pick up the script, I look at it, and I said, Darius enters in cat costume from Cats. I went, no, no, no. Goes, I was so excited to get a play. And in fact, a lot of my friends said, I cannot believe you're leaving Cats to do this little off-Broadway. It wasn't even off-Broadway then. It was at the WPA Theater. And I was making 1/10 of what I was making on Broadway. But you have to take gambles like that. Anyway, the play was a big hit. We did not know what we had. He rewrote it every day, and it turned out to be one of the most wonderful plays I've ever gotten to do in my life. And I got to reprise my role in the film and play opposite Patrick Stewart. And Sigourney Weaver was in it, Olympia Dukakis, and Steven Weber. You can rent it. After that, I continued, luckily, to work on Broadway, and I finally realized I did, what was it? Joseph the Amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat, then Scarlet Pimpernel, and a lot of off-Broadway, what is called Forbidden Broadways, where they make fun of all the Broadway shows, and then the Scarlet Pimpernel, and Saturday Night Fever, and Seussical the Musical, which I thought should have worked, and Beauty and the Beast. But I realized that Broadway productions and everything connected to it, it's just like community theater with a lot of money pumped into it. It really is. It's the same ego. It's the same, director, actor, friction or non-friction. It's just you get paid a lot of money. Well, not a lot, but you get paid more than you do in community theater. But it's been my love, and I hope I continue to get to do it. I'm waiting to get a contract right now as we speak, every day, just checking the mail or checking my email to find out if this new show is going to be going to Broadway. And you never know. It's quite fitting that I guess I'm in this business because I do like the roller coaster ride, given to my grandfather and father. So thank you very much.